My mother is an immigrant from Central America and a naturalized citizen. And she, like so many Americans, is horrified and angry at the Trump administration's treatment of legitimate immigrants on our southern border. What is your concrete plan to fix our broken immigration system and stop the inhumane treatment of immigrants?
Thank you. Thanks for the question. If you don't mind me asking you, what country did your mother come from?
Panama. She's right there.
Thank you for being here. We saw 400,000 apprehensions at our southern border last year. To put that in perspective, in the second year of the George W. Bush administration, there were 1.6 million apprehensions. And those that we were apprehending last year very often came from the Northern Triangle countries of Central America. And they were fleeing the deadliest places on the planet and making a 2,000-mile journey, much of that by foot.
So a lot of his answers started with explaining what's currently happening with immigration. But while we were watching this, Francesca, you felt that his answer was pretty strong. Some of his remedies for the immigration issue you felt were strong. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I guess I feel like every time a politician from a border state talks about immigration, it's usually from the right, and even if they are a Democrat, they're like, well, we got to toughen up, and it's always about security, security, security. And here you have a Democrat from a border state who's actually not xenophobic, and I think some of his initial answers in this town hall, you should go back and watch. They have a really deep understanding that culturally Latin America and specifically Central America and Mexico, right, and the United States were one and the same. And the heritage and the roots and the culture between Latinos and Americans is really fluid. And I think that very few American politicians understand that and appreciate that. And I think that's gonna win them the Latino vote. So I feel like he's strong on this. I mean, I think the concrete answers, I think Democrats are always pushed to be like, well, what's your number? How many are you letting in? He had a great answer to the children who are seeking asylum who are unaccompanied minors. And he said, if they're fleeing violence, absolutely, we would give them asylum.
Yeah. And I thought it was good that he seemed to, without being very explicit, acknowledge the US role in creating the conditions in those countries that have led to the people that are trying to enter right now. He could have been a little bit more explicit with some of the foreign policy causes of that, but he talked about it in a way that I haven't heard a lot of candidates talk about. He focuses on this topic more than some other candidates. I think it's an area that he sees as a strength of his.
Yeah.
And so we were talking a little bit about him in a lot of his answers, sort of just saying what we already know. One thing that I do want to see is, he said right there, we have, worst case scenario, a fourth the apprehensions that we did, 15 years ago. He mentioned that the people who are born outside of this country commit crimes at far lower rates than those who are native born. Like, those are the sorts of fact checks that I want to hear over and over on these cases, because remember, we don't talk about it, but we're still in a national emergency right now. And I think that pointing out how ridiculous that is a good thing going forward.
Yeah, so I thought his statement before, not at this town hall, about tearing down the wall was a little gimmicky. But I agree with you guys. There's a strong answer overall tonight. So when he talks about, hey, undocumented immigrants commit far less crime than the average American, you almost never hear that on television. So it's refreshing that he does that. And to me, most importantly, he doesn't talk about immigrants in terms of them. He talks about it in terms of us. And he seems to kind of internalize that. And you'll see, like, for example, when Nancy Pelosi talks about progressives, she always says them, right? She always makes them the other. And so it gives you a sense of what she really thinks. So with Beto, you get a sense that he really does empathize, sympathize, and relate to immigrants, which makes sense. And being from El Paso probably helps, and a lot of his constituents were recent immigrants.
Yeah.
So, but it's refreshing to have somebody talk like that.
So his answer on immigration was fine. It was also one of the answers where he talked about reaching across the aisle and doing things not as Democrats, not as conservatives, the nonsense about working together. I have news for you. Republicans have no interest in working on, helping children who are seeking asylum at the border. They have helped Trump, assisted Trump, made excuses for Trump putting children in these cages. So His answer was strong. I love the fact that he brought up that immigrants actually commit far less crime than US born citizens. But again, if your mindset is, we can accomplish great things by working together, then you're gonna accomplish nothing because they have no interest in working with you. They're interested in obstructing any attempt in doing anything positive or progressive for immigration.
And the question should be more specific because Democrats on this issue, they always exchange asylum for militarization on the border. That's just how it goes. Oh yeah, we'll let more immigrants in. Oh, let them out of detention. And then we build a higher and higher non-wall wall, have more attack dogs, right? That's not the solution either. And I don't know if we're gonna get to this, but for me, I think the moment that he's shown the most was when he was talking about how protecting wages in the United States has everything to do with protecting wages across the border.
Yeah, I want to play that video because he answered, or he gave this answer in the context of the trade discussion. But I think that this is also a very important way of thinking when it comes to the immigration issue as well. So let's go to video 3.
Part of the reason is there are no real labor unions or ability to organize or use the leverage of the value that they provide in those maquilas to demand better wages and working conditions and benefits that are good for those Mexican workers, and then also make the worker here in the United States be able to compete on a more level playing field. So I want to make sure that in a revised MCA that I would love to be able to negotiate, that we ensure that that US worker is on a more level playing field with any country with whom we have a trade agreement. I would also add stronger environmental protections and stronger human rights protections.
So I thought that answer was good, not only in the context of trade, but if you focus on improving the conditions for workers in Central American countries, in Mexico, and I think that also simultaneously helps with the immigration issue, right? If you empower other countries and you work with them as an ally as opposed to an enemy, well then that will be part of a comprehensive immigration reform package that I think makes a lot of sense.
Right, I mean, redirecting the money that we put into this failed drug war throughout Central America and the training that we give to their essentially paramilitaries, to suppress the local populations. Instead, what if we strengthen labor laws? But of course, for that, you have to get corporations on board. But I think that back to why Trump has appealed to people is because Democrats have not challenged the fallacy of free trade and the fact that free trade hasn't worked out for working class people and jobs have left because there is a race to the bottom when it comes to global capitalism. So you just go wherever the most repressed people are and the people who work for pennies on the dollar. So like that, I think he needs to make those connections a little bit harder. But that was a strong answer.